Well, could you tell us a bit about why you want to be leader of the Conservative Party and what kind of leader you'd like to be?
I know this is going to sound maybe a bit soppy or a bit poetic, but I love the Conservative Party. And I mean, you ran through that list of things that I have achieved. And if you took the Conservative Party out of the equation, it would be a shorter and much less meaningful list of things that I've achieved.
Okay, so no actual utility. No, well, I wanted to solve hunger issues. I wanted to be able to help people with disability. I wanted to make the world a better place for the less fortunate. No, actually, the Conservative Party, I love it because otherwise I wouldn't have like such a successful resume. I wouldn't be able to have all of these things added to my CV. Mate, it's an act of public service, not the Duke of Edinburgh awards that you can then show off after your political career at some future high-paying job in industry that you're almost certainly going to want to do a bunch of hand shandies to get later on, once all of the political red box money has dried up. Once your leadership period is over, if it does even start in the first place, once you're swanning off to do a highly paid consultancy role for 4 hours a week. Here's what I did on my CV, and there's so much I love the Conservative Party. I love these interviews where you watch right-wingers be interviewed by right-wingers, because they're so much more candid and so much more sincere about just kind of how removed from normal people's struggles they are. His overriding desire to lead the Conservative Party, Ted, was that if it wasn't there, I wouldn't have such a strong personal resume. Yeah, sure, mate, okay. That certainly sounds like a life of public service being read out there.
So a lot of what I've achieved because of the Conservative Party, because Conservatives in government, whether it be at City Hall or nationally. I was born in '69, as you said in that biography. So I kind of remember the winter of discontent, not in any kind of details. Don't pretend to understand exactly what the dynamic was or why things were happening. But even I could tell, with power cuts, and it just felt not good. It felt bad, and there were strikes, and it just.
I mean, the 3-day week was under Heath. That was a Conservative Party problem. It was Heath that did that because of his failure to deal with the Yom Kippur War, not being hawkish enough on Israel's actions in the Middle East, that we were then negatively affected by the hike in oil prices because we weren't trading with the Gulf states.
And then I saw a Conservative government under Margaret Thatcher, transformational, as my dad's business started doing well. Mum was a midwife in Sierra Leone. And
that's the other great thing as well. It's like, yeah, I really like the Margaret Thatcher years because our family personally got really wealthy. It doesn't really matter about all of the devastation across the north of the country, all of the industries that were shut down, the villages that became ghost towns, and all of the livelihoods that were destroyed in service of trying to make the rich richer, which is essentially all that happened. But on over Daddy Cleverly's business, that did really well out of Thatcherism. So it transformed the country for the better, clearly much improved if Daddy Cleverly managed to make some dosh out of it.
And public services seem to be getting better, less industrial action. And so I suppose I was always a Conservative. And after the election defeat that we had, I mean, fear that the party that I think has done so much for this country through the long arc of history and recently runs the risk of slipping below the waves. And I know that I could not in good conscience just sit back and watch that happen. There's not an implied criticism of the other people running, but I think I'm best placed to make sure that doesn't happen. In terms of the style of leadership, I'll lead the way I've always led, which is to try and recruit good people, motivate them, give them a clear mission, strong parameters, trust them, but be comfortable with pulling them up when they get things wrong. And look, that's the style of leadership I had when I was at City Hall, when I was chairman of the Conservative Party, when I was Foreign Secretary, when I was Home Secretary, and I've been successful in all those roles. So I'm going to stick with, what I regard as a bit of a winning formula.
And today we had the...
Literally, I'm sticking with the winning formula because I have seen success. At no point ever in what was discussed here did he ever talk about his own personal level of public service. It was, think about my resume, I want to be successful, and also my dad got rich off of Thatcherism.
Economic growth figures out showing the economy had grown by 0.6%. Do you think this shows that actually it was madness for Rishi Sunak to call the election when he did?
Look, none of us have got a time machine. None of us can play the counterfactual. There's no sliding doors version of reality where we can test what would have happened. What I know, frankly, is by the time we got to the general election, a lot of voters had just stopped listening to us. Because although these growth figures are good, actually the growth figures we had just ahead of the general election were good. The unemployment figures were good. We'd reduced taxation on working people, not once, twice.
It's incredible to talk about good growth figures. The growth figures they were getting of like less than a percentage point in growth. It was good in comparison to Germany that was in a recession. But when you actually compare it to plenty of other states, anyway, like the United States, who were just running deficits and doing fiscal stimulus at the trough of the business cycle, actually doing proper Keynesianism to invest in rebuilding the industries that had been destroyed by Clinton and Reagan, like in Detroit or whatever, or in the left behind areas in Georgia, then like Republicans took credit for, they were getting tiny growth. In 2022-23, right, Bolivia had 5% growth, and they had 3.5% growth the year afterwards as well. Yet we get peanuts over here.
We got lowest unemployment, half the rate that we inherited from Labour. But you know what? Guess how many people gave a monkeys about that on the doorstep? Square root of zero. And that was down to us. We had lost the right to be listened to by the voters. So the fact that we had some really good stuff to tell.
No, it's not because people just didn't trust you. I mean, obviously they didn't trust you, that is true. But the reason why they wouldn't listen to you and said, oh, well, look at the growth figures. Did those growth figures translate into better public services? Did it translate into a fixing of the cost of living crisis? Did these translate into a reduction in NHS waiting times? Did it lead to wages actually going back above inflation so that we had some level of pay restoration? No, because you didn't fix any of the issues with underfunding, the issues with privatisation, the issue with supply-side labour market reform, the issue with all of your neoliberal austere guff that had ruined these public services and had ruined our labour market for the 14 years of government. You went, oh, well, GDP has increased by 0.7.5% or whatever it is. Why aren't you enjoying these numbers that I've pulled down that literally mean jack shit to the regular person on the street? Why do these numbers mean nothing to you? Yeah, because these numbers actually mean the house prices went back up because of they changing the rules on stamp duty, for example, or financial instrument markets had rebounded. Now the gilt yields had started to come down in the run up to the election, and therefore more investment from pension funds into financial instruments had driven some level of economic growth that didn't translate into real people's incomes or real people's livelihoods or an increase in the Human Development Index. Of course people didn't actually get engaged with you when you just mentioned GDP figures, James. What else did you expect? Look, the graph here says that you should be happy. Why aren't you happy, plebs? I have looked at the graph. I've looked at the numbers on the graph, right? And this says plebs should be happy because red line go up equals world more gooder. Why aren't you listening? It must be because we've lost the right to be taken seriously. No, you are not connecting with people over the actual issues that matter to them, which is their own material conditions, of which GDP numbers mean nothing.
And I'm not convinced that perhaps another couple of months and another round of good figures to sit on top of the good figures we already had would have made the difference. I think there are some things that we need to do. Maybe we'll talk about those later in terms of our behaviour, our tone, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we engage with the British people. But the fact is, we went into the election with a strong economy and we got a really nasty slap from the voters. So I'm not sure another round of economic figures would have changed that necessarily.
Oh my God, these people live in dreamland. What was good about the economy? The only way that you ever think this, the only way you ever get to thinking these things is when you never have any personal interaction with the real issues of the failure of economic policy. Oh, my dad's business was doing well, so everything is fine, for example. Literally that, but as the crafting of a political policy and a political campaign to get elected. Just out here saying, well, the economy was fine, we lost the election, who knows what's going on here? The economy was demonstrably not fine. In every actual real outcome, it wasn't fine. But of course, James Cleverly, in all of his years at private school or in the army or as a Conservative Party MP or a councillor or whatever, has never had to ever care about whether the broader economy is doing well or not, because he's always been rich. He's always been rich. He never had to care. He doesn't have to care if NHS wait times are high, because the guys can afford to go private. Doesn't have to care about school roofs collapsing. Remember when we had to send kids home from schools because these schools might collapse because of the funding that was taken away from the school refurbishment programme by the Conservative Party, by Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, at the time very specifically, taking that funding away. Do you think James Cleverly ever had to care about that? No, because he was sending his kids to private school. He literally sent the kids to the private school that he was sent to as a kid. So he doesn't have to care about the real economic effects of underinvestment from the state. And so they go, well, oh, my only interaction with how the economy works is through theoretical numbers on a graph, because I am so detached from the reality of everyday normal working people that I can only conceptualize the economy through numbers rather than through material conditions. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment that helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.